29th Sunday in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. The Lord was pleased to crush him in infirmity. If he gives his life as an offering for sin, he shall see his descendants in a long life, and the will of the Lord shall be accomplished through him. Because of his affliction, he shall see the light and fullness of days. Through his suffering, my servant shall justify many, and their guilt he shall bear. The word of the Lord.
Justice and right, of the kindness of the Lord the earth is full. Lord, let your mercy be on us, as we place our trust in you. See, the eyes of the Lord are upon those who fear him, upon those who hope for his kindness, to deliver them from death and preserve them in spite of famine. Lord, let your mercy be on us, as we place our trust in you. Our soul waits for the Lord, who is our help and our shield. May your kindness, O Lord, be upon us, who have put our hope in you. Lord, let your mercy be on us, as we place our trust in you.
A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has similarly been tested in every way, yet without sin. So let us confidently approach the throne of grace to receive mercy and to find grace for timely help. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." He replied, "What do you wish me to do for you?" They answered him, "Grant that in your glory we may sit, one at your right and the other at your left." Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They said to him, "We can." Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right or at my left is not mine to give, but is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they became indignant at James and John. Jesus summoned them and said to them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord.
October 21st, the 29th Sunday at Ordinary Time. The first reading comes from Isaiah 53, 10-11. This is part of one of the songs of the suffering servant, in which we hear that the servant would take the guilt of the sins of the people upon himself, suffer, and thereby effect an expiation for their sins. This is an idea which is not common in Old Testament theology. The Jewish people didn't believe that the suffering of any person could bring any good into the world. So this idea is new, and it's an idea which Jesus would apply to himself whenever he called himself the Son of Man. He would always include vocabulary taken from these songs of the suffering servant, so that his mission was not to be the Christ or Messiah as the Jewish people expected, but rather to be the suffering servant who, because of his obedience to the will of the Father, would be exalted. We hear another version of that in the second reading, Hebrews 4, 14-16. Jesus is called our great high priest. In the letter to the Hebrews, the author often speaks about the traditions of the Old Testament and how they were a foreshadowing of what came in the New Testament. One of those traditions was that of the high priest. But the high priest was human and therefore fallible. He had to offer sacrifices first for himself and then for the people. This author says that Jesus is the high priest who's perfect, but nevertheless, because he became human, he's able to sympathize with our weakness. He's able to totally identify with us without losing his divinity. The Gospel comes from Mark 10, 35-45. This occurs immediately after Jesus has predicted his passion the third time. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come up to Jesus and ask to sit on his right and left when he comes into the kingdom. Jesus responds, "Do you know what you're asking for? Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" To drink the cup I drink is the cup of sorrow, the cup of suffering. And we have to remember that when we partake of the chalice at the Eucharist. When we partake of that, we're not only receiving the blood of Christ, we're also promising to live like Christ and to die like Christ. We're dying to ourselves. Likewise, to be baptized with the baptism with which he's baptized. Remember, baptism is not simply being born to new life, but it's also dying to an old life. There's an icon of Jesus which shows him at his baptism, and immediately behind him you can see a tomb in the water. The idea that baptism is both life and death. Jesus then instructs the disciples that they have to be willing to die to themselves and become servants of everyone. That authority in the community is not based upon power, privilege, but rather based upon service. The Son of Man came to serve many. Remember that title, Son of Man, which is associated with the songs of the suffering servant. He came to die so that we might live, and we are called in that life to die to ourselves. And may God bless us.